And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another rather disappointed episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight, Indiana loses at home to Eastern Washington 88-86. This is a game that Indiana jumped out early, actually came out and played through the first 4 minutes, what I thought was about as well as they have played all year, and led 14-4 at the under 4-minute timeout. And from that point forward, Eastern Washington outplayed Indiana by 12 points and earned this victory. This was not a fluke victory by Eastern Washington. They threw the Hoosiers in the rest of that first half and the second half, and got the victory. Kind of victory that leaves me a little bit speechless because while in the pregame, if you follow us on Twitter at Assembly Call, you know that I was cautioning people on saying that Indiana was going to win by 15 to 18 points and predicting a game that was going to be closer, probably in the 7 to 10 point range. I thought it was going to be a competitive game. Certainly not a game that I thought Indiana won as they did. It does lose 88-86, and we're going to be here tonight to break it all down for you. I'm Jerod Morris, your host on the Assembly Call. I will be joined tonight by Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, so we have our full crew with us. If you have questions for the show, feel free to tweet us. Use the hashtag AssemblyCall, and we will be able to pull it up here on the show. You can also go to the YouTube page for the show, and if you go to assemblycall.com/live and scroll down, you'll see the link for that. Go there, participate in the chat, and we can talk there. Of course, we always start out the show with our banner moment, and tonight for me, really it's not hard to find a positive in tonight's game. Obviously, the loss is a big negative. But the positive tonight was that I thought Yogi Ferrell played really, really well. He led us with 27 points. He had 7 assists. He had 4 rebounds. He only turned the ball over once. He was 12 of 13 from the free throw line. He was 7 of 15 from downtown. But really late in the game, this basketball game turned into a carbon copy of last year. And we've talked a lot this season about how different this team seems than last year's team. And yet, at the end of tonight's game, it felt a lot like last year with Yogi basically playing hero ball, and I didn't really blame him because his teammates weren't really helping him out very much, weren't being confident or assertive on offense, and he decided to try and take over. And it was really Indiana's best offense and its best chance at scoring, and a lot of times he did. Unfortunately, Indiana wasn't able to stop anybody because when you score 86 points, you should win a game, but when you give up 88, you're not going to win money. So my big positive tonight was Yogi. I thought he played really well. I thought he did everything he could. It wasn't a perfect performance, but I thought he did everything he could to try and lead Indiana to victory. Unfortunately, the rest of his team wasn't up for the challenge tonight. And to Eastern Washington's credit, and especially Drew Brandon, Tyler Harvey, and Venky Joyce, who were all outstanding, all scored 20 or more points, they leave Assembly Hall with a victory that they earned, and a victory for Eastern Washington that we will break down here on the rest of the show. So I will now turn it over to my co-hosts, let them give their opening thoughts, and then we will break down this thoroughly disappointing loss for the Hoosiers. So we'll start with Andy's bottoms line, and then we'll go over to Ryan for what should be a rather lengthy rant this evening. So, Andy?
Well, it appears that the season on the drink is back. I can tell you that I have opened one beer since starting the show and have a backup and within arm's reach because I may need more than one to get through the show. I mean, from a defensive perspective, I mean, this was just I think hot pile of garbage is a term that was used out there, which is obviously more than accurate based on how this was. It was, Eastern Washington really, give them credit. They had a good game plan. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. They would run ball screens and handoffs out top until they got a matchup they wanted, which tended to be Drew Brandon on anyone, and, got him to the basket. And they shot over 56%, I think, from two-point range. And I think it's telling that a team that coming into this game had shot 53 or 54% of their shots from three-point range, tonight only shot about 25% of them from there. I mean, they clearly saw the weakness of this team that was on display, even against SMU, minus the turnovers, and certainly against Lamar with the the amount of points in the paint that were given up, and clearly came in with a game plan to take advantage of that. And IU had no answers based on what they tried to do defensively. They tried a little bit of zone late. But again, Venky Joyce had 14 rebounds, 8 offensive rebounds for him. And IU just didn't really have an answer. The points in the paint in this have to be. I know Jordan Littman tweeted it out at one point. It was pretty ridiculous. I mean, it had to be just ungodly what it ended up. And I mean, you give up 1.23 points per possession to a team from the Big Sky, albeit a team that's going to challenge for that, for that league's title. Odds are you're gonna get beat. And this was ultimately the difference between a game like tonight and the SMU game. Forced, I think, 9 turnovers in the first half. It was 8 or 9, and only 5 in the second half. And that was ultimately what won that SMU game. That they turned them over so many times. And so even with a near 20% turnover percentage for Eastern Washington, even that wasn't enough because the defense was so poor. And so I feel like we're kind of back to where we were even after the SMU game. Even though the outcome was a lot better, it feels that the concerns that we had in many ways about this team are far from solved at this point, based on what we've seen. And I think there appear to be no answers defensively right now for this team. Perea, I'm sure we'll talk about, but he was outside of those first few minutes was kind of an unadulterated disaster defensively as the game went on, and also on the boards. And the problem is, you look down the bench, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but it was pretty tough to think of 5 guys you'd want out there defensively by the end of this game.
And Ryan, over to you. I mean, I'm pissed off right now. I really am. There's no other word for it. I think that this team just gave up defensively. I mean, they just, as soon as a guy got a dribble, they just olayed him and let him go to the hoop. I mean, there was no effort to even step in and protect it. I feel like, in stretches, I thought Stan Robinson did a good job. On ball defensively, I thought Yogi did an okay job at times on ball defensively. Other than that, I can't name anybody who had a good night on that end of the floor. And I think that, even Robert Johnson, who's a great perimeter defender, looked awful tonight. James Blackman Jr. is an okay defender, and he looked horrible all night defensively. He was just getting beaten. It was almost like they were overplaying the three without changing what they were doing when they realized that Eastern Washington wasn't shooting threes that much, and they were just overplaying it and getting beat every single time. And it was depressing because it was an easy fix. Just slide over and step in front of the guy. And they just, they consistently were just letting guys go. And to be fair, I saw Crean on the sideline just telling them back off and defend. You could see it several times, and they just didn't do it, didn't improve. I mean, it's on the coaches too. There's no defending that. But I mean, even when they tried to change what they were doing, the kids just didn't implement it. And I think the biggest problem tonight were the 2 freshmen. I mean, Blackman was okay offensively, but really just ineffective and shrank from the moment. Johnson led the team in turnovers with 4 again, and just makes some boneheaded mistakes from time to time. They're freshmen. They'll get better, and they're going to have off games, and we need to prepare for that. But at the same time, these guys, when they get down, they're integral parts of the team. They're starters. They can't wallow in it and just let it go. They need to pick things up. And I know Yogi had a great night statistically, but I also fault him late in the game with making some stupid decisions with the ball. He drove to the hoop down 2 and tried a finger roll in the middle of traffic in the post and got rejected. Then late in the game, we're down 3 with, I think it was about 10 seconds left. And rather than passing the ball or driving and kicking for a 3 to tie, he tries to go into the middle and get a 2. And he clearly was in traffic, didn't have a great shot at it, threw a ball up, and it got knocked. It didn't go in. When he had Blackman wide open in the corner, or a number of other guys beyond the 3-point line who could at least step into his shot. I mean, those are bad decisions from a junior in a key situation of a game. I mean, I'm not saying those shots go in or anything, but at least those shots give you a chance to tie. I mean, you're kind of playing out the string with the score 2 and foul thing because there's only 10 seconds left. I mean, there's barely enough time to get the ball up the floor on the other end if you score and then foul them and then get a rebound. So I just think that we've got to have better awareness from our leaders, and at the same time, the young guys really need to step up and watch this tape and realize they got embarrassed tonight.
Well, frankly, I didn't feel a whole lot of belief in the other guys that were on the floor, just based on kind of their body language and their activities. So I can kind of see, I felt like on offense, Yogi was the only one fighting. except for Troy when he thought he had a chance at a dunk. And, I mean, sometimes that worked out, but his last attempt, I mean, he got fed pretty well, but he had to go for the big-time dunk instead of trying to make a decent play, and we lost that possession. So I have a hard time faulting Yogi on offense anyway. Go ahead.
I agree with you there, but at the same time, then Yogi needs to take a three because there's just not enough time left to keep playing that 2-point foul game.
I agree. On the last possession, you're down three.
Ball fake and get fouled or something. Stop the clock. You can't just nonchalantly wade in there and throw up a loose shot. I mean, either you got to be 100% sure you're going to make it, or kick it out to somebody who has a chance to tie the game. And again, it's a small thing because who knows? Probably wouldn't have made it, but it's decision making late in the game from one of our leaders in a game where nothing's going right. Make something happen positive.
Yeah, we've got some listener questions, as you might imagine, after a game like this. One of them I want to address right away because I want to spend some time talking about the freshmen. And here is a question from our buddy Wes Geyer. Let me see if we can pop it up there. Is it coming up? I don't know if it's coming up. But the question is basically no playing time for Holt. Why not? And we've got another question from Howie Hoosier. How bad can Holt and April be not to play at all when no D is played in the paint? April, it's really hard to say because we know he's dealt with injury issues. And so he was able to play in one of those first couple games and looked halfway decent. We haven't seen him since. We simply don't know enough about his health to know. As for Holt, it's similar. Holt in that last game against Lamar, when he got in there for the first time, I thought he looked really good for that 4-minute spurt. Not as good in the second half, but certainly enough for that first half that it tantalizes you and you say you want to see him play. But without seeing these guys in practice, I will caution anybody on making judgments about why they're not playing. Because, like you say, for these guys not to play when Indiana is so bad defending the paint, you can question Tom Crean, but he's not, he's not a complete idiot. Like if Emmett Holt and Jeremiah April can help this team playing defense, if they've shown that in practice, I feel like they're going to be playing. So my assumption is those guys aren't proving it enough in practice to crack the rotation. Now, that doesn't mean that I still don't want to see them play, but I think we have to have at least basic trust in the coaches that if these guys have earned playing time, they would get it. Before we move on to James and Robert, just real quick, your guys' thoughts on that, especially Emmett, who I know everybody's been excited to see play, but is it at least reasonable to think that he probably just hasn't earned that time if he's not playing, especially in a game like this? Ryan, you jump at that first.
Yeah, well, one thing you have to remember is that all offseason they were planning to have Devin Davis fill that role. And so Holt also didn't get the entire offseason with the rest of the team. He didn't, he's not in the same situation a normal freshman is, a guy who was on campus early. So there's a pretty good chance he doesn't know their defensive. He's not in sync with their defensive rotations. He doesn't know the offense terribly well yet. I know people are want to say, and at times tonight I was like, why don't you just go to Holt when Perea is so ineffective? But if he doesn't know what's going on, it's going to be even worse with him, and especially in a close game. You're hoping that maybe somebody figures it out and steps up, like Honor or Troy playing down low or something, that maybe something works. Maybe after tonight, he'll just get thrown in regardless. But I think that in a close game, when a guy maybe doesn't know the situation, know what's going on, and it could throw a wrench and make things really, stutter offensively and defensively, you don't risk putting him in the game. Maybe earlier in the game they should have gone to him, and maybe that was the plan, that if we got up by 15 or so and had a solid lead, throw him in there, see how he's doing, and then pull him out. But this game never got to that point. And so I think it's hard to judge on that because of that aspect of it. I agree that I'd like to see him involved, but that role, that guy who was supposed to come in for Honor and give us great minutes offensively and defensively was Devin Davis, and he's gone. And so you can't just shove somebody in there and expect it to work. You've got to make sure they know what they're doing out there and not getting embarrassed.
So, Andy, we did get confirmation tonight that James Blackman Jr. is indeed human, and he is indeed a freshman. After playing lights out for 4 straight games, James finishes with 10 points. He needed kind of a desperation 3 at the end to get that. His sterling rebounding fell off tonight, only 2 boards, a couple of assists. He was actually 2 for 3 from downtown. So efficiency-wise, he was really good. but Eastern Washington did a pretty good job of taking him out of it. And I just, it felt like a very off game for him tonight. He didn't feel as assertive offensively as he has, and I think part of that was the defense being played on and just not being able to get into a rhythm, and that seemed to affect his defense a little bit and his rebounding perhaps. What did you take from James Blackman's performance tonight?
Yeah, so I'll get to Blackman in a second. Let me just talk on the whole thing for a minute. I mean, my only argument against that, I guess two arguments against not at least trying him out. One, that would probably not have been the weirdest lineup decision that we've ever seen Crean make, to throw him out there for a minute. And we saw with Hotzel in the second half, it doesn't take too damn long to figure out if a guy has no idea what's going on. It's pretty obvious. And I mean, could he be worse than the guys that were playing? Maybe. But I mean, we had guys that one play, Hotzel and Hartman just running into each other. I guess I don't know. We obviously haven't seen enough of Holt to know, but at this point, we had seen enough of Perea tonight to know that he's going to bite every shot fake, and even on the ones that he doesn't get, he was more interested in trying to take charges than get rebounds and whatever else. So I guess I'm of the opinion that at some point, I mean, you're getting crushed in the paint. I just saw somebody tweeted out that Eastern Washington had 48 points in the paint, and they made 26 two-point field goals. So 24 of their 26 two-point field goals are in the paint. Can he be worse than that? I would argue he probably can. So maybe he comes out and doesn't do anything. I don't know, but I guess that remains to be seen.
I'm just saying it seems so obvious to play him. Like, I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt because it seems like it's so obvious to put him in. But
yeah, I don't know. So anyway, hindsight's 20/20 on that one. I guess we'll never know whether he would have done anything good or not. But I would have given it a shot. He had just as good a chance of doing something as Perea did based on what we had seen tonight. But in terms of Blackman, I definitely felt like, Eastern Washington definitely did a good job with him, and they had, compared to what you'd see in a lot of other, mid-major type conference teams, I mean, they had some bigger, longer guys that could guard him. Harvey's 6'4". I think Brandon's probably right in that same range, so I think that helped a little bit. But I definitely, I don't know if it was a case where things didn't come as easy to him early, and then kind of didn't know how to react. He's gotten off to a pretty hot start, it feels like, in most of these games so far. So I don't know whether that had anything to do with it. But I mean, he played, for him to play, based on the way that he played thus far, to play, I think, 33 minutes tonight and only get 8 shots, got to the line just twice, just didn't seem overly aggressive, and he took the third most shots on the team behind Yogi and Troy, and was close to, a couple others. I believe, Johnson took 7, Zaislav took 6. I mean, I don't think more often than not that's going to be a winning formula. They have to find a way to try to get him shots, but things were harder for him than before. Although I would argue that it isn't like Eastern Washington was great defensively. I mean, overall they gave up 1.19 points per possession and really haven't been all that good defensively heading into this game. At least from a team perspective, and that was one of their issues last year. They came in 232nd in Pomeroy defensively, so it's not like they were a juggernaut by any means defensively, but I do think they did a good job of frustrating him, getting him off to a little bit more of a slow start, and then felt like it snowballed a bit from there, and he didn't really end up taking. I'd be curious to go back and look and see kind of when these shots came. I don't feel like prior to that shot right before the buzzer, I don't recall the last time he had taken a shot prior to that.
There were 2 guys that I thought did some productive things, Colin Hartman and Troy Williams, and I want to talk about them. But before we get to them, let's talk real quick about Robert Johnson, because he has received a lot of plaudits, a lot of praise for his play early on, and well-deserved. But tonight, like James Blackman Jr., this was his worst performance as a Hoosier. And, I think I know he's a freshman. This is only his 5th game. And so you do, you have to, be careful in your criticism, of course. But I think tonight, he still was able to do some things, grab the 4 rebounds and get a couple of assists. But, his 4 turnovers really stand out. And I think with Robert, one of the biggest things that's jumping out with me through the first 5 games is he has at least 2 just really, for lack of a better term, boneheaded, careless turnovers a game. I mean, I'm talking about the dribbling off your foot, just like a lazy pass to nobody type, like the ones that should be the easiest ones to prevent. And if he's going to handle the ball as much as he is and be given as much responsibility as Tom Crean is giving him, he's got to earn that too, for a freshman. So, and I think his lack of I guess an ability to curtail those turnovers is starting to concern me a little bit, because he's playing a lot of minutes and he deserves to, and this team needs him to, and he does a lot of good things, but he's got to cut those turnovers out. And I thought tonight, really for the first time, I thought we saw his offense affect his defense a little bit, because while he did have a few possessions where we saw just that crazed on-ball defense and he forced a turnover, and Indiana, I think, forced a shot clock violation in the first half, or at least it was a good possession, we didn't see enough of that. Ryan, your thoughts on Robert tonight? Really, his first kind of really poor performance in an IU uniform, I thought.
Well, look, I mean, all of this is with the discussion with Johnson and Blackman is they are freshmen. They're going to have these games. You have to expect them. The problem tonight was that they both had one at the same time, and that really was a problem. And yeah, I think Johnson had some silly turnovers tonight, just stupid things where, like you said, dribble off your leg, not really know where he's going with the ball, and kind of be looking around and then have it bounce up off his knee or something like that. I mean, that's stuff that he shouldn't have happened to him, but he's a freshman. He probably doesn't have a direct idea what he's doing, or gets confused or whatever. And, he rebounded the ball all right, but there were times where he and Blackman got out-hustled to rebounds that they clearly were theirs. And I think that when things started going poorly for both of them, they let it snowball instead of stopping it, instead of recollecting themselves and, refocusing themselves and attacking the game. Instead, they let the game come to them and got bowled over by it. And I think that for Blackman, Andy was talking about him. I think tonight was the first game he hasn't gotten clean looks from distance all year. I mean, the ball movement and stuff was fine for most of the game, and he just wasn't getting clean looks. I think people are overplaying him, are going to start overplaying him from the three-point line, which means he's got to have confidence in his ability to ball fake and go to the hoop. And tonight he clearly didn't. He would take one dribble and move the ball to somebody else instead of taking the impetus to put it on the floor and go to the rim. So, I mean, both guys just easily their worst performances. I think Johnson really needs to realize how important he is to this team as the guy who's probably going to be the primary ball handler when Yogi's not in the game, and needs to refocus and get better at taking care of the basketball.
Hey, Andy, let me ask you a question. Obviously, you studied Tom Crean's lineup decisions and substitutions. So Indiana comes out, 14-4 run to start the game, and I thought that unit played really well together. And you'll have to do the analysis. It's assemblycall.com/subscribe to get on our email list and get the post-game analysis where Andy analyzes this stuff. I don't know, and you'll have to verify this, I don't know that unit played together again for the rest of the night. But look, I'm not, obviously, Honor, after that first sequence when he came back in, didn't really do a lot. And we've talked about how the two freshmen struggled. So I have no idea if putting those guys back together at any point in the game again was going to do anything. But when you have a lineup that clicks like that, I know they didn't play together again in the first half. Why do you not put those guys out there again? Why are we constantly mixing and matching as opposed to going with some lineups that seem to work? Or am I crazy?
No, I was I noticed you said something about that, I think toward the end of the first half or maybe early second, and I kind of look back at the first few games this year. And so just to kind of walk through, so the Mississippi Valley State game, obviously not a huge barometer for anything, but the lineup that was the best in the first half didn't play again at all over the course of the game. There was a group that was plus 10 in about 3 minutes. They didn't play together again the rest of the game. In the Texas Southern game, there was a lineup that was plus 5, was the best one from the first half. They did play again for a little bit less than 2 minutes in the second half. SMU, I'm kind of doing this on the fly, but there was a group that was plus 8 in the first half. That group didn't play together again the rest of the game. And then Lamar, there was a group in the first half, looks like plus 6 was the best, and they didn't play again together in the game. So, I mean, obviously it's a 4-game sample size. The players that were available in games 1 and 2 were not the same than the ones that were available in games 3, 4, and now 5. But there is a trend to that. I mean, it tends to feel like when I do this, there's not a ton of correlation, and I often feel like I write that is, oh, the best group didn't play together again. And it's interesting that in the Lamar game, one thing I thought was kind of odd was that Crean, that was one of the first times I can remember where he didn't come out in the second half and start the same guys as the first. Certainly had been the first time this season of it, and I don't feel like it happened a great deal last year. But in the Lamar game, it was a completely different group that had not played together at any point during the first half that would suggest, like, okay, this is a group that played really well, and so now I'm putting them back in. And so I'll be interested to see tonight whether that winds up being the case or not, whether the group that started the second half played together at all in the first. I'm honestly not sure. I'm not, on the flip side of that, and, we haven't talked about Pere yet other than some of my opening comments. I don't think anybody's arguing that he should have come out based on how little he seemed to be used over the latter part of the half. And I'm not, he didn't play well, but I also, to your point, don't know, is it something with that group? I don't know. I mean, again, in a game where...
He played well early. He played well in the first 4 minutes of the game.
Yeah, in a game where there wasn't a lot of things working well, I mean, it does feel like you'd at least give it another shot. I don't know. But I guess to answer your question, I think the pattern of using the best lineup or consistently using those kind of quote-unquote best lineups by, how much, they grew the lead over the course of the half seems to be something, at least for this year, hasn't happened a whole lot. And I don't know what exactly the reason is for that, but, again, there are plenty of times that he makes lineup decisions that would make less sense than coming back with this group of starters that got you off to a 14-2 start.
So, Ryan, let me go over to you, and let's talk about a couple of the guys who I thought, for the most part, played well tonight. Troy Williams, look, you're going to have to deal with some boneheaded decisions from Troy when he's playing aggressive, but I think net, Troy Williams being aggressive is good for this team. And he had 19 points. He had 9 boards tonight. He was active. Yes, he went up for a dunk later when he probably should have tried to just go up for an easier shot. But ultimately, this was a good game for him. He was efficient. He was 8 for 14 from the field, a solid outing. I thought Colin Hartman, again, was able to come in and be productive. He only got 15 minutes, but, again, off the bench was good, had 7 points, had 4 boards. He battled. Wasn't a perfect effort by any means, but he did productive things with his time out there. So, the majority of this show is going to be negative. Let's spend a few minutes and at least talk about 2 guys who I thought overall their play was positive.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Troy Williams is better than he was last year already. I think he just was more aggressive all over the court, more confident, and was a much more confident finisher close to the hoop. I think he's always been a good finisher. I just thought he was very authoritative tonight, and he didn't question himself at all when he went up. That ball was going in the hoop. That last dunk was maybe pushing it a little bit. At least put 2 hands on the ball and get fouled, as opposed to trying to, go Jordan and just with an insane throwdown. But yeah, I think that Troy is better, and he's showing it. And I think he looked better tonight than he did in the last 2 games. And hopefully this is a sign of things to come. I thought he held his own in the post for a while. He got bowled over a little bit late. He's still not a great on-ball defender. I think he looks better off the ball than he did last year, but really that's not saying much because he was terrible off the ball last year. He still needs to work on that aspect of his game. Offensively, I thought he was clearly better. As for Hartman, I mean, he is what he is. He's just an energy guy who gives you great minutes, is around the ball, and impacts the game. There were times he was out of position defensively and didn't look great, but it was an overall net positive, I thought, for him. He had a really clutch 3 late in the game, and I just thought, defensively, offensively, he was in the right position a lot and did a lot of the right things. And if we get more guys to do those things, I don't think we'd have as many problems as we do right now.
So 2 quick notes. Number 1, good friend of the show, Galen Clavio of Crimson Cast, for the record, predicted a 15 to 20 point win for Indiana today. So typically, in terms of doom and gloom, he is on kind of the far end of the spectrum, kind of the negative spectrum, or realist spectrum, I think he would have you say. and he picked a big victory. He was even more optimistic about this game than I was. So, Galen, I blame you for this loss. Your overconfidence is never a good thing for this program. Number two, comment from Tom Crean, who is now at his press conference, and I'll read you some of the quotes as they come through. Via Jordan Littman, sounds like his opening statement was, "We've been highly concerned for this game since we saw it on the schedule." Andy, I will kick this over to you. Eastern Washington, we've known, obviously, this game is kind of, and you told us about this the last show you were on, is sandwiched between, Lamar and UNC Greensboro, two teams who aren't very good. Eastern Washington was supposed to be the challenge of this trio of games, a team ranked, I think, in the 180s or 170s in Ken Palm. But even with that, and knowing that they're a good three-point shooting team and going to win the Big Sky, this isn't really a game at home that Indiana should be concerned with, should they? I mean, should we? Indiana was concerned about this game coming into it. Or is that just coach speak?
I think to a certain extent that's coach speak. I mean, obviously they're going to say they're concerned about anyone, and I think, honestly, if you look at the laundry list of sub 300 teams that we play outside of the the handful of major conference teams, I mean, this was the only game that really stood out that was kind of in that middle ground area where it wasn't a brand name of somebody that you'd play, but it also wasn't somebody just unbelievably terrible. So in that regard, I guess maybe it stood out a little bit, but I don't know. I guess I don't know that should matter in the end. I mean, while they certainly came in, you knew what they they had some offensive skilled guys, but you also knew they didn't defend all that well. So it just felt like a case where you had a pretty good idea of what they would want to do. And I guess you made some comments on the postgame radio show about having a lot of guys that are good off the dribble. Well, welcome to basketball. There's a lot of teams that have a lot of guys that are good off the dribble. So I'm not sure why that should throw us off so entirely. And I agree that while game plan wise, you might look and see Eastern Washington take so many shots from 3-point range and say that's what they're going to do here. It was apparent early on that was not the case. So some adjustment has to get made there to figure out how you keep some of these guys from getting into the lane. I know the commentator on the game talked about with Brandon in particular, who I don't believe came into the game as a great shooter. I'll kind of look that up while I'm here. He was 1 of 8 from 3-point range on the season. So feels like a guy, like, back off of him and make him make a couple threes or something. He did hit a long jumper late, but I guess I would rather err on the side of that while you're continuously getting beat by him on the way to the basket. So I don't know. I think that's coach speak. I mean, you're not going to come out and say, we thought we'd win this game. It's no big deal. So I'm not sure what the alternative is.
Exactly. Like, people complaining that he said that are just looking for somebody to complain about. What's he supposed to say? Oh, well, we thought this would be an easy one. Well, screw us. We got killed. No, what do you expect him to say? He's a coach. He respects the other coach. He's not going to come out and say we should have won this game easily. He's going to say, hey, this looked like a tough game. There's a reason we played this team, blah, blah, blah. I mean, come on. It's just a stupid thing. You can be mad about the performance, but a coach going on saying, hey, we played a good team is, after they beat Mississippi Valley State by 50, he wasn't going to come out and say, yeah, they're terrible. Come on. Let's be realistic here. Be upset. There's so many things to be upset about. People flipping out because he said we looked at this team on the schedule, and I'm seeing it on Twitter, and people are just being idiots. Like, forget what he says in a post-game interview where he's going to be coach speaky. That's what it's there for. So, yeah, this is moronic for people to be upset about one sentence in a post-game radio show or post-game interview. It's just.
I knew we could find a way to get Ryan defending Crean after a home loss.
I'm not defending him. I thought he coached a horrible game tonight. But come on, be mad about that. Not. Oh well, he's saying Eastern Washington looked good coming in. What's he gonna do? Say they looked horrible coming in? They're one of the worst teams in America. I mean, come on.
Okay, so in terms of
I'm sure dumber things will get said as we see additional tweets in the press conference. So I'm sure we'll have other opportunities.
Right, and Ryan, you make a good point. So in Crean comments that seem absurd, but that we should take seriously. Zach Osterman quotes Tom Crean as saying, "We've got to get past where our best post defender is Yogi Ferrell." Now, I want to just kind of pause and let that quote sink in, where our best post defender is Yogi Ferrell, right? Our point guard. And while we've seen some great defensive performances from Yogi, notably last year against Michigan, against Nick Stauskas, him saying that Yogi's our best post defender isn't actually absurd, because at times that's actually true.
I tweeted that during the game. It's absolutely true.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with size or strength or whatever. It's all technique about getting in front of the guy, or when he's too high, getting behind him, getting side front, whatever. Yeah, it's all technique, and Yogi is the best as far as technique goes. I've seen Stan Robinson do some good stuff as well, but yeah, Yogi's our best post defender as far as technique goes. And again, when he says that, it's not going to be, he doesn't mean that we're going to have Yogi guarding the 5. What he means is when his guy gets in the post or when there's a switch or whatever, he's the one who's best at technically, defending his guy and neutralizing him. And that's absolutely 100% true.
Right. Okay, so let's have some real talk then, okay? We're 5 games into the season. A lot of the questions we had about this team are being answered, and they're being answered in the way that we thought they were, which is that this team can shoot, this team can score, and it really struggles to rebound, and it really struggles to play post defense. Frankly, I'm a little less concerned about the rebounding now, because I feel like the guards are rebounding a little bit better than I thought. Like, that's still a problem, but it's not as big of a problem as I thought. The big problem is that this team gives up way too many easy shots. So, knowing what we know, okay, let's just, we have this team, we have this roster. What do we do with what we have to play better defense? Because I will posit, look, Stan Robinson wasn't great tonight, but the one thing he does seem to give you is some decent on-ball defense. And, he wasn't great at it tonight. No one really played great defense tonight. But, can you make the case that a guy like Stan, especially when Tom Crean makes the comment coming out, in his radio show that this team had some great dribble penetration. Andy, as you said, welcome to basketball. Well, how do you stop that? Perhaps you put one of your 2 best on-ball defenders on the court more. So is this a game where Stan Robinson should play more than 13 minutes because, while he wasn't great at the defensive end, he was 0 for 3 and a little bit out of control at times. He doesn't really make his free throws. He does play some pretty good on-ball defense, and perhaps that helps you prevent a couple of layups, just guys dribbling straight from the three-point line all the way in for a layup, which happened way too many times. Maybe he helps you do that. Is that how Stan Robinson's going to carve out more minutes, and should he in a game like tonight when you can't stop dribblers?
Yeah, I thought there was a time during the game, and I'd have to go back, and I know Ryan and I went back and forth this about toward the end of the game, where I think they had Zeisloft in instead of Robinson when they were trying to, press and get a steal in that final minute. And maybe that's not true. Either way, I guess I would go back to, Zeisloft's kind of the easy comparison. Maybe Robert Johnston is based on, he was definitely struggling tonight. Zeisloft played 25 minutes. I don't think he's even close to the defender that Stan is. Now, on this team, that's not saying a ton, but he consistently had, he was definitely one where, I'll say this, when Eastern Washington would run things up top and get to a point where, they got that matchup that they wanted, there weren't many times when it wasn't getting somebody on Zeisloft, and then they went right to the basket. And so, I think we saw a decent amount of that. I think, Johnson played 25 minutes. I'm not sure either of those guys played well enough to warrant twice the minutes of Stan, given that they weren't providing a ton offensively, and we're struggling on defense, where at least Stan is going to give you defense. I don't know that you can expect more offense out of him, but you're probably not going to get less at that point. He shot poorly from the free throw line when he got there, but I was a little bit surprised by that, if for no other reason than it seemed to be what Crean went with early in that second half against Lamar, to get a defensive spark. So I thought that was interesting, that he didn't see a little bit more time, because they had, at that point, I'm throwing anybody out there that can defend on the perimeter, because nobody had really shown too much ability to do that. Not that Stan was great defensively tonight by any means, but I think from a potential standpoint and even from an experience standpoint, we saw him be very effective as a one-on-one defender in stretches last year as well.
Ryan, I'd like to get your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, as for the Robinson Zaislav thing, I thought Robinson was in the game. I could have been wrong. I just with all those switching towards the end, to get guys who had enough fouls left on to make fouls and all that stuff, I got lost. I didn't know if he was on the floor or not. I definitely would have Stan over Zaislav unless Zaislav was just the designated fouler at that point. I'm not sure. I don't think Zaislav is a disaster defensively. I don't think he's great though, and I think he's probably average at best. But they have the reasons for doing that. I whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. Maybe he just is better at getting everyone lined up correctly or something. I don't know. But I would have had Robinson. If Robinson wasn't in the game, I would have had Robinson over Zaislav for sure. I think that some of the substitution decisions are puzzling. I've never strayed from that thinking. I always just try and find what he may have possibly been thinking in those decisions. That doesn't mean I'm agreeing with them.
So this is kind of an impossible question. I'll just ask it anyway. What are we to make of Honor Mascara-Perea at this point? You start to read some of Crean's comments here in the post game, and he's kind of given the Bill Belichick on Honor Mascara-Perea, and asked why he didn't play. Well, he didn't play very well in the first half. Based on what I'm seeing here, it sounds like he said that to a couple of questions. So, what are we really to make of Honor thus far? He started out the season relatively well, and against some of Indiana's lesser competition, he's played decent. But against SMU and here against a team in the sub 100s, he's really struggled. And I thought he was really aggressive early on. Didn't play much more in the first half. Wasn't very productive with his minutes in the second half. It was tweet-worthy when he grabbed a rebound late in the second half because it was his first rebound. I mean, what do we make of him? I mean, are we at the point where our starting center, who is slated to play 30-plus minutes a game, we just have to hope for something good from him? Or is there – I don't know. I'm not really sure if this is a question or a comment, so if either one of you wants to rescue me, feel free.
I got it. Look, if Crean pulled Perea because he wasn't playing well, he certainly was correct in the second half. Maybe he saw it trending that way because Perea was pretty awful in the second half. I don't know if one caused the other. Maybe getting pulled screwed his confidence or something, but he just didn't seem into the game. He just like he was floating through it or something. And I saw parts of that in the first half too. I don't think it was, he played. I don't think he was amazing in those first 6 minutes. I think he did some aggressive things early.
He was like he was into it though. Like that's what I mean. I mean, he was focused. He was alert.
See, I thought towards the end of his stretch in the first half, he didn't look good. I thought right off the tip, sure, yeah, he looked.
That's what I mean. Like through the first 4 minutes, basically, yeah.
Yeah, and then I thought it faded quickly and went downhill, and there were times that, and this really disturbed me. There were times that guys would drive on our guards, and nobody would step up on the interior, whether it was Troy or Hunter or whoever. Nobody would step up. To step in and help on defense. And that is the most disturbing thing, I think, from this game, is that there was no help on the interior once these guys got past the first line. And frankly, for the rest of the season, I know you have an issue with how we close out to three-pointers. I would rather have teams shoot 33s in a game on us because we're not guarding them too tightly than letting them drive on the way they did tonight. I mean,
sure.
that was atrocious. I mean, and I would much rather just have us back off the three-point line, not play as aggressive, and guard against the drive because this was brutal tonight.
Go ahead. What I thought was interesting with Perea is I don't know that anybody's arguing. Again, I'd be curious to go back. I did think he was pretty aggressive those first few minutes and seemed a bit more dialed in than what he had been in other games. But I guess my question would be, if he had played that bad, he came back in during a crucial stretch of the game and was equally horrible at that point. I mean, he went for what I would not even say is a good shot fake that I think it was Venky Joyce went in and kind of had this weird up and under thing where he made a fake, but it would have just been a really awkward shot that Perea went flying at. Then I think on either that one or another one, managed to get himself, tried to block a shot. I think it was Harvey came in not long after that. He tried to block a shot. He had no way to block. Took himself out of position for the rebound. And then there was another play, I think right after that, where he just got completely outworked and really didn't go after the ball when he was on the weak side on a rebound. I don't care if he's not playing good. If he's playing so crappy, sorry, um, caught myself. That's good. I haven't drank that many beers. I haven't drank that many beers yet. That's good. But I mean, honestly, like if he was playing so terrible, why in the hell are you putting him in the game during a crucial stretch where, again, I mean, I go back to the ML Holt thing. It might sound stupid. He hasn't played in the game. Is he worse than a guy that you already know has played terribly and then proved to play terribly? I guess that's where I struggle. Is I don't have a problem if you want to take him out, but then don't reinsert him in the game at a crucial stretch where he just makes a series of poor decisions, and the same kinds of things that he was doing that got him benched. I just thought that was odd, and I think he's definitely a guy as we look forward that is already fragile from a confidence standpoint, and I think that I think this just is going to play into that, and so you wonder for him as a guy that we've touted as being extremely important to this team going forward. Even I went so far as to say he might be the most important guy, not the best, not the most exciting, not whatever, but maybe the most important. I question his mindset going forward based on how he played tonight, any of these post-game comments, how he responds to that. I think at this point is a complete wild card.
Yeah, it is. Just based on some of Twitter, we've been so focused on the show, it looks like some events are unfolding around the country that are a little, crazy, I guess, and certainly more important than talking anymore about a basketball game. So, a disappointing effort tonight for Indiana. Let's go around the horn real quick with some final thoughts, and let's get off here and hope for better days against UNC Greensboro. Andy first, then Ryan, then I'll close it up.
Well, I'm actually going to be at the UNC Greensboro game, and a part of me now wishes that I didn't spend a lot on tickets, but I feel like I could have gotten a better deal in the wake of this game. So that's the ultimate takeaway for me, is that I probably could have saved a little bit of money by
always go the way of the scalper the day of, Andy. Come on now.
I know. I got a pretty good deal. Anyway, so the problem starts to become the schedule again, and not to kind of beat the drum on this for the umpteenth time, but you have a game coming back, and I'm sure they're going to bounce back and beat UNC Greensboro pretty handily. They're not a good team. They're currently 300th in Pomeroy. Then they've got the Pitt game, although Pitt has one of their better players is injured. They had another guy get suspended. They haven't played particularly well. That will certainly be a bigger test than UNC Greensboro. Then you've got Savannah State, who scored, I think, 5 or 7 points and a half against Louisville. And then you play Louisville, and then you play Grand Canyon. So my issue is, at what point do you get another read on how much this team is improving from these things? Because they're playing a number of opponents that are going to mask these deficiencies. And we started to see these things creep through a bit in the Lamar game, and even in some of the other games. I mean, the talent level on the opposing side just wasn't enough to overcome those. But even against SMU in a win, you couldn't help but feel that if there weren't so many turnovers, what could have happened in that game based on how well SMU did score on the possessions where they didn't give IU the ball. And so, I think we're going to run into a few games here, and maybe they look better against Pittsburgh, maybe they don't. But Louisville game is not one I think people were feeling good about to begin with. So they lose that game, it turns into, they might have lost that anyway. I think that's where the schedule hurts a bit, and that you're not going to get a ton of other tests from here on out. And so winning a bunch of games, if that's what they end up doing, I just don't know how telling that is. There are serious issues to correct at this point based on what we've seen in recent weeks. And they don't seem to be getting any better. And again, I keep going back to, we're 5 games in. The big question marks we had about this team around rebounding and defense inside have 100% not been answered. So while it's great to sit here and feel better about the shooting and the scoring, it's not going to matter when you're giving up, 1.23 points per possession, to a Big Sky team. And I think I saw Jeff Rabjohns tweet out that they didn't get they may have gotten 3 consecutive stops once in the second half. I actually don't even know that I remember that. I found myself toward the end thinking, when was the last time they even got consecutive stops? And it wasn't as if there were some sets that Eastern Washington ran, and I think that 3-pointer toward the end came on one of them, but there wasn't a lot of sophisticated offense going on to get the looks that they got, and IU was completely unable to adjust and shut down driving lanes. And the guys who are driving the ball are only going to get better from here on out. So while a week ago we're cautiously optimistic following that win against SMU, I think the things that even in that game were concerning now feel like even bigger concerns, and really make you wonder how this team's going to react going forward, because I don't know, based on what we've seen of some of the guys on there, that we know that there's a clear answer. And maybe that's why Holt seems so intriguing, because he hasn't let anyone down yet. I don't know, but
he's like Colt McCoy in Washington.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think there's an element to that, but definitely, like I said, I'm curious to see how Pereira responds. I'm curious to see how Blackman and Johnson respond to kind of their first setback, at least with those two. But a lot of questions to be answered, and this is a point where I think somebody tweeted this to me, maybe to both of us. It kind of said, Crean's unacceptable. He said, wrote off a bunch of things. This is unacceptable. Unacceptable comments were fine 7 years ago, not now. You should never lose to a Big Sky team. We have to get past this at some point, and unforeseen things happen with the roster, but there has to be, the seat is getting warm, I guess, is how I would say that. And this was, if this is a sign of things to come for the season, it's going to be a long one. So you try not to overreact too much to one win, like the SMU game, or one loss like this one. But I do think the things that plagued IU in this game are starting to emerge as a pattern as opposed to an anomaly. And so we'll see how things go. But the Big Ten teams that I've seen so far look pretty tough. So it's going to be tough sledding if you can't find a way to keep people out of the lane any better than they have thus far.
Ryan, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. This is not where you want to be this early in the season. I think for some reason I get the feeling they're going to come out and just blow Greensboro's doors off, and like Andy said,
it's not going to matter.
That's what I'm saying. Is that we're going to blow Greensboro's doors off, and we're not going to learn anything. So again, it's how they play in the next game doesn't really matter. I think that Pitt game is the one you're looking at. Luckily, these guys have a few days off to let this sink in and embarrass them enough to maybe, light a fire under their butts. But we'll see how they come out. I mean, these guys are going to watch this tape, and it's not going to be pleasant. And they're either going to react poorly to it, or they're going to say, crap, we can't do that again, and grow up real fast. Hopefully, it's, the latter and not the former, because if they don't learn from this loss, there is a lot to learn from this loss. And if they don't learn from this loss, it's going to be a very long and very disappointing season. And as to the Emmett Holt thing, I think it's about time to start getting him in that rotation, because we need help in the post. Even if he's not the answer, at least he's a fresh body that can get out there and jump around and do some things. And
at least he's a question.
Exactly. And, there are probably 100 reasons why he didn't see action tonight. And we don't know them, but it's probably about time to get him in that rotation.
Yeah. I'm just going to close off tonight by actually talking about the Eastern Washington guys, because I thought the announcer on TV made mention a couple times about Venky Joyce in particular just kind of wanting it more. And frankly, that's what my eyes told me too. And so I just want to, instead of ripping on our guys to end the evening, just, throw some positive toward Eastern Washington, because those guys came in and absolutely earned a victory at Assembly Hall in a game when they fell down 14-4. And a lot of undermanned opponents have come into Assembly Hall, fallen down early, kind of lost their belief and gotten blown out. And Eastern Washington never did that. And Drew Brandon, Tyler Harvey, Venky Joyce, those guys, a lot of times teams that are ranked in that vicinity where Eastern Washington is and below, come in here and don't make an impression. And we talk a lot about the schedule and how poor it is and why are we playing these teams. Well, frankly, I hope we were playing this team because they taught us a little bit about how to compete, because they came out and competed tonight. And unfortunately, we didn't. And I realize we have deficiencies down low, defending big guys and all that different stuff. but it still comes down to competing man on man, and I thought Eastern Washington just outcompeted us, and they earned the victory. And so kudos to those guys because I thought they played really, really well. And, I tweeted out at some point, has anybody offered Venky Joyce a scholarship yet? Because, to have a guy who competes like that, and he's not, he's certainly not perfect, he's not pretty, but he finished the night with 20 points and 14 boards because he just came out and played hard. And so when this team watches the film, I hope they watch what those guys did and how they competed and how they never gave up, and learn a little something from that, because our guys certainly have the talent, but I think tonight showed that they still have to learn how to overcome adversity, learn how to compete on a possession-by-possession basis, and if they don't, anybody can beat them, and anybody can beat them at home. And that's not something that should be. And a loss to Eastern Washington at home should always be unacceptable, and this one was. And that's really all you can take from tonight's game. So obviously there are a lot more important stories going on, so let's get on with the rest of our night. Thank you to everybody who watched. We'll have our post-game email sent out tomorrow morning. And I guess in closing, let's hope Indiana certainly looks better and plays with a little more heart and a little more effort against UNC Greensboro, because certainly we need something positive going into that Pitt game. Because the other problem when you lose a game like this, I tweeted out earlier, Indiana needs to win 2 out of the 3 games against Pitt, Georgetown, and Louisville to not be behind the 8 ball going into Big Ten season. You don't erase this loss from your resume at the end of the year on the NCAA tournament. That's the one thing when you play teams who, no matter how much heart they have, if they're ranked low, as Eastern Washington is, that's a loss that's not going to look great. So now you got to make up for it, so hopefully this team is able to do that. All right, for the Assembly Call, I'm Jerod Morris. Thank you to Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips for being here. Thank you to everybody for watching live. We will talk to you after the IU-UNC Greensboro game. Have a good night, everybody.